Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello guys, welcome back to our class. So today we are going to look at chapter 5 of your textbook, social science textbook, and the title of the chapter is called Resources. So basically we are going to understand what resources are and how resources are useful for us and how it helps in the development of our lives and the sustenance of human beings on earth as well as in different countries. So, what is a resource? Resource or resources are everything that is available on earth which is useful and necessary for man's or human beings' existence. So, anything that is available on the earth that is useful and necessary for human beings' livelihood, for the sustenance of the human beings or life's sustenance is called resource. Now, resource can be of mainly two types. First is natural resource and the second type is man-made resource. So, by the name itself, natural means which is not made by human beings, which is not produced artificially by human beings. It's naturally available, right? And man-made resources are produced, created by human beings, okay? Now these resources, what they do is by the use of these resources, we satisfy our needs. Human beings fulfill their needs and wants. Okay, so we have our goals, we have our achievements, we have our desires. In order to fulfill that desire, we use the resources so that we achieve the goal. Okay, so with the use of resources, both natural as well as man-made, human beings fulfill their needs as well as their wants. Okay, so the resources that are available, they must be technologically accessible, they must be economically feasible, and they must be culturally acceptable. Meaning, there are plenty of resources, many kinds of resources, both natural, man-made. Okay. Now, these resources, not all of them can be used by human beings to fulfill their needs, to fulfill their wants. They have to be accessible. Okay, they have to be able to be used by people in the ways they can use. And in order to do that, technologies should be there. Okay, for digging, for converting, for processing, all that needs technological assistance. So it should be, the resources should be technologically accessible. Okay, now if the resources are such that even with the help of technologies, even with science and development, all that development and improvement in terms of science and technology, if we cannot access that resource, then that resource cannot be a resource for us which will fulfill our needs. Okay, and the resources also needs to be economically feasible. We should be able to afford that resource. We should be able to get it and make use of it. If we cannot afford it, if we do not have money, if we do not have manpower, if we do not have energy to get that resource, then that also does not fulfill our needs and does not become the resource that we need. Okay, and another thing is that resources should be culturally accepted. Now, it should be accepted by the culture of one region. Okay, it should be acceptable to all right, it should not be just acceptable to one person or one family, but it should be also culturally accepted so that it helps in fulfilling the needs of a community, of a region. All right, so these are very important points of resource. Now, these resources, okay, the resources, they have relationship, interdependent relationship between nature, human and technology, right? So we said that how resources need to be accessible, technologically, economically feasible and culturally acceptable. So the resources that we use, it is dependent upon the relationship that it has with the humans and with the technology. With the development, with the improvement of technology, the accessibility increases, the possibility of discovery of resources, use of resources, utilization of resources, and then contributing to the development of the country increases, right? Now, the resources has to have relationship, or its relationship with human being is also very important. Human beings use resources, gives back to resources. So there are these relationships. Okay, so this relationship is not only between human beings and resources, technology and resources, but it is between all of them. Now, earlier there was this idea that resources were free gifts of nature because it is openly available on earth, in our planet. But gradually people understood that actually it's not free gifts of nature. We have to be careful about its use. We have to be careful about how we are getting the resources. Okay, resources fulfill the function of human activities. It helps in fulfilling our activities. So we need certain medicine. People need medicine, drugs, right, for curing certain diseases, illnesses, to feel better, to make their health better, to improve their health. So what do? They get the resource from the forests. From forests we get certain plants, certain herbs, or certain chemicals from the caves or from the natural resources, and that is used to produce the drugs. So you see, those in that way human activities are also sustained by the resources. Okay, now human beings itself is part of the resource, and they are called human resource. Okay, so the humans itself, the human beings, you and I, all of us, we are also part of the resource, and that part of the resource is called human resource, and it is a very important of all the resources. Okay, very important part, as important as other resources which we'll study about in some time. Now, the use and development, okay, of all other resources are determined by the humans. It is the humans who are using the resources, who are processing the resources, who are making utilization of the resources, who are managing the resources, and then leading to the development of a country, of a community. Okay, so human beings play a very important role in how the development of a place, development of resources, use of resources is determined. Okay, so human beings are very important. Now, how do the human beings do this? How do they use the resources? How do they cause the development of resources? They use their intelligence, their knowledge, the information they have. Okay, and with that they transform the naturally occurring substances, which are resources, into usable resources. So resources are not available in the nature in a ready to use form. We just can't go to the forest, we can't just dig into the earth and get the resource and immediately use it. We get the resource, and then that resource has to undergo a process, and as a result of that process it reaches a final product or a final stage. That final stage, we apply it in our activities, and that leads us to our development. Okay, so that can be done only with the human intelligence, human skill and training. With that, the process is aided, and then at the end we get to make use and utilize the resources. So the human beings, they interact with the nature by utilizing the technology. Okay, so with the help of the technology, they interact with nature, get the resources, process the resources so that they are ready for use for the people. Okay, so they form institutions. Okay, these institutions are established, these institutions are set up like research institutes, colleges, universities, and that leads to the technological development. Okay, and that technological development leads to proper utilization and management of the resources, and that ultimately leads to accelerating the economic development of the country or of the communities in the world. Now, resources, like I said, they are not usable directly. They cannot be used. They have to pass through a process. Okay, and only after that process is complete, the resource can be used by us. For example, we take iron. The iron that we get, right, the metal that we get in the market, we can easily go buy it. But then that iron is not found in the nature as it is available in the market for us to purchase. When we dig or for the resource of iron, then what we find? We find iron ore. Okay, now this iron ore is the resource, and this iron ore is dug or it is found, and then it is then put through a process, and as a result of that process, finally what is made? Iron is made, and that iron is used for the human activities. Okay, so resources become resources only when it is usable. Iron ore becomes a resource only because after it is processed and made into iron, that iron is usable. That iron can be used by human beings. Okay, but if this iron ore would not produce iron and that iron would not be of any use to us, then the iron ore would not have been the resource. Okay, so a resource becomes a resource only when it can be used by human beings. So there are some divisions of resources. There are many divisions, but we'll look at some of the divisions of the resources. Now this is a chart, and this chart simply explains how resources are divided into different categories. The first division is it is divided into natural resources and human or man-made resources. And the natural resources are again divided into non-renewable resource and renewable resource. The human or man-made resource is divided into quality and quantity resource, and another is structures and institutions resource. The renewable is divided into continuous flow and biological. Non-renewable is divided into recyclable and non-recyclable. The biological is finally divided into natural vegetation and wildlife. Now these different categories of resources, as you can see it is important to remember, but it is not necessary to go through it one by one. But we must remember all these categories, alright? Now, according to how or where they are originated, the resources can be also categorized. So, according to the origin, we have biotic resource and abiotic resource. So, biotic resources are those resources which are available from the biosphere, from the environment, and have life. They are alive, they have life. So the biotic resources are human beings, livestock, fish, flora, fauna, etc. Abiotic are those which are found and have no life, so non-living things. Okay, they are rocks, minerals, land, water, air, etc. Now another category of resources based on exhaustibility. They are two. First is renewable resources. Second is non-renewable resources. Now, renewable resources are those resources which can be renewed or reproduced or recreated. Okay. So, the process of being renewed, that takes a long time. But ultimately, it can replenish the resource. So, example of this is solar and wind energy, water and forests or vegetation. Non-renewable resources are those which take millions of years to form, okay, and they cannot be reproduced, they cannot be easily renewed, okay. Some are recyclable, some of the renewable resources are non-renewable resources are recyclable, while others are non-recyclable, okay, and they get exhausted, they get depleted over time and cannot be replenished. So some of the examples are metals, fossil fuels, etc. So based on ownership, the resources are divided into four types. First is individual resources, second is community owned resources, third is called national resources, and fourth is called international resources. Now, individual resources are those resources which are owned privately by individuals. So examples are farmers who own the land, or people who own houses, etc., or plot of land, okay. Community owned resources are those resources which are owned by the community and used for the benefit of the entire community, okay. Example, public parks, playground, village ponds, grazing grounds, burial grounds, marketplace, etc. National resources are those resources which are owned by the nation. Most of all the resources are owned by the nation, okay, the country. Each country, most of the resources that fall under that country is owned by that, the head of the country, the nation. So, for example, the forests, the minerals, wildlife, water, these are all owned by the nation. International resources are those resources which are owned by international institutions, okay. Here no country can utilize their no country can have a power to use the resources. They have to seek the permission of international institutions before they do anything to those resources, all right. On the basis of the state of development, again resources are divided into three. First is potential resource, second is developed resources, and third is stock and reserve, okay. So potential resources are those resources which are found in a region but not utilized. Developed resources are those which are being developed with the use of technology according to the level of feasibility. So the resources which are used with the technology according to the level of their feasibility. What is possible, they try to, however it is possible with the use of technology, they try to use the resources, okay, or the resources can be used. The third, stock and reserve. So stock, what is stock? The environment has certain reserves which can be utilized to satisfy human needs, but humans do not have the technological know-how to access and utilize such resources. These resources are considered as stock. So there are certain resources which are required for the human need, but the humans do not know how to make use of that resource. We know that a resource becomes a resource only when it can be used by us for our activities, right? But those resources which are required by us, which we need, but we cannot use it because we don't know how to use it, or we don't yet have discovered the tools to use it. Those are called stock, okay. And reserve, there are resources which can be utilized with the help of technological know-how but are being postponed for future use. So the resources which are there and they can be used with the help of technology, with the help of advanced technology, but they are not being used because they are being saved or reserved for future use, okay. So those resources are called reserve resources.